let's see. Should be.
It's even better because now I didn't get a chance to get nervous, so we're good.
Good. Just threw it right into you.
Yeah, just walk into it. It's no big deal.
Okay, let's see.
I've actually kind of picked up a couple of guys out here as new mentors, mentees.
Oh, nice, man.
And it's kind of happens everywhere I go. So
that's awesome.
It's been interesting.
Okay, I'm going to copy the key, pop it into here. Live stream. This is the first time I've moved it over into a...
I mean, I'm good, man. Today is a day where we actually don't have anything going on.
Oh, perfect.
So I'm available.
That's awesome. I'm glad it ended up still working out.
Oh, yeah. I would have made it work anyways, man. Luckily enough, my position now is very much based on other people and a lot of consulting. So it's more just kind of like, hey, I
just got to be
that.
around.
Yeah. Hey, I wouldn't do that if I was you. That kind of thing.
I am just going to do this instead. This is going to be easier.
I always forget to show you, too. I was wearing your hat, but...
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this. I'm trying to figure out all the tech stuff on my end for the first time too.
Good,
for a lot of this stuff. We're gonna do this. Edit. Okay, so we're going now. We should have, it'll show just a number of a handful of guys that come in. I don't think we'll be able to see them or anything like that, but I told him that we'll have like a live chat function available if anything comes up. But I did end up getting a handful of pretty good questions ahead of time that I think would kind of direct some of the conversation. So to give you a little bit of a heads up and background on, so with the 6-week program that we're in week 4 of right now, each week has kind of a central theme topic that we dive into throughout the week, and then we have calls and stuff like that. And we did nutrition, we did goal setting, we've done a couple other things, but this week actually ended up, like I said, working out because we're talking all about environment and how your environment influences so much of your success, right? And so I used three, I kind of, the way that I described it was I used 3 different types of environments, right? So we have the physical environment, which is the literal stuff around you, and sometimes the people around you, right? And then there is the mental environment, which is what's going on inside your head, and then the spiritual environment, which is, you know, emotional, soul, that kind of stuff. And having all of those in lockstep and putting those in good places to set you up for success is how we really make like the long-term gains. Right. So when you were talking about wanting to talk about, you literally use the word environment. I'm like, oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Like, this would be the perfect week to do it because we're already talking about this kind of stuff.
That's perfect. Yeah, I do the same kind of framework. It's just physical, spiritual, intellect, and emotional. Usually is what I usually go with. So yeah, it matches up perfectly. We'll be good. We'll make it work.
Awesome. So in that regard, we can do questions first. We can save those later if you had something that you wanted to lead off with in that regard. Was there any way that you wanted to talk about it?
I mean, I'll probably just do a quick introduction just because I don't know who knows or who heard the podcast. And then other than that, well, I guess we'll roll right into questions and kind of go from there.
Let's do it.
All right.
Give us the heads up. Where are you? I guess, I mean, well, tell us what you can about where where are you, but give us the background and what you're doing now.
So former soldier. Now I'm a government contractor, at least for a little while longer. Currently in Iraq, and I'm a consultant. I'm a glorified consultant. That's the easiest way to put what I do. on the side or for fun or whatever you want to call it. I run a couple of mentorship and men's groups, as well as train for powerlifting. Right now, I'm kind of dabbling in bodybuilding. Father of four, I run a business, and I try and stay busy as possible. And my mission statement, I guess, would be to just help men and empower and better men, so they don't have to make the same mistakes that a lot of us made.
And are you doing stuff mostly with other military guys right now? You mentioned you picked some up while you were over there, I assume.
So,
other military guys.
A big chunk of my group are either veterans or active duty guys. I do have some that are not veterans, not anything. I had a couple guys who just down on their luck, wanted to make a big change in their life, and so this happened by accident. Kind of like we talked about in the podcast. A lot of it was, hey, you need to go talk to B. And then people would get my phone number. And then when I got Marco Polo, I started creating groups on Marco Polo.
Nice.
And then, so it kind of led us to here and some of the framework, which you see on Instagram a lot, and the things I talk about. So,
yeah. Where is the, how have you developed kind of the system that you're using for working with a lot of these guys?
I mean, honestly, it's exactly what we said, man. Trying to be wise instead of smart, right? Like you want to learn from others' mistakes, and then through my own mistakes, trials and tribulations, and then like we talked about on the podcast, with my upcoming book, it's been about how I dug out and changed my own problems, which, oddly enough, or through serendipity, is mainly through environment. Is how I started.
Yeah.
So to kind of capitalize on what we're going to talk about today, a big chunk of my change started off because I decided to change my environment.
What was the first, in the environment space, what was like the first thing you had to change? Was it physical stuff? Was it mental stuff? Where did you have to begin with that?
So because of my situation, I kind of did it all. And what I typically recommend with people, if you can't change your physical environment, well, let's take that back. In changing your physical environment, if you are limited, you still can change who you hang out with. You can still change some of the actual physical surroundings to be and lend towards better habits and better practices, whether you're an impediment person or an ease person. And what I mean by that is, if you're an ease person, you want to make your habits as easy as possible, right? Or if you're a person who, even if it's easy, you have to put something in your way to stop you, to make you do that habit. Right. So those are things you can do. Your friends, I think, and who your acquaintances are huge. That's my biggest one. I'll tell people when it comes to environment. That's just not physical. Is who you associate with, who you talk to, that what you consume is a big piece for your habits. And then the other one for your mind, your intellect and emotional space is thoughts come too fast. You can't just change your thoughts, no matter how much we'd like to think that. So what I typically tell people is watch your words first. Don't even try and change them. Just try and watch them at first. So like this week, I actually got my second female that I'm mentoring, whatever. And that was kind of what we talked about with her, was like, for the next 21 days, anytime someone pays you a compliment, don't detract from it. Don't anything. You just accept it. You don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
If you can't think of anything good to say nothing. Just witness it, recognize it, and go forward.
Yeah. Right.
And then once you can witness it and recognize it, that's when you're going to start combating it with actual words. So if somebody tells you, hey man, or a good day, right? If somebody's like, hey man, how are you going? Everybody wants to be like, oh man, I'm having a crappy day, or this, that, and the third. Right. Instead, hey man, I'm fighting through it. It's going pretty well. It's never, and it's not to be Mr. Positive, but it's just to kind of recognize what it is and then reframe it into from a place of power and advantage. Right, that's kind of where I want you to operate from. And so that's how I started changing my mental and physical space, because, like I said, you're not going to change your thoughts. They're coming, they're popping off, and so words, thoughts, actions. Right.
Totally. We actually did a lot of. Yeah, we actually did a lot of it comes up in the goal setting week, using how we watch our actual language and the actual words we're thinking and saying, like you said, because we're writing goals down, right? Like it really matters the words that you use. But the words that you use when you speak are the same words that are floating around your head that you're saying to yourself all the time too. You know, like you said, you can't necessarily change them, and it takes a while. It's not going to be like this one day. I'm like, hey, I talk to myself great now. I'm always, I'm peaceful, like all this kind of stuff. It takes a lot of work. And I made the example of like the Pavlov's dogs example, where when I was going through a lot of this stuff, and I would recognize certain words that I would say that I didn't want to say anymore. For me, it was like just a lot of soft talk words, like words that were just filler words that were junk, that didn't mean anything, like your likes, just, buts, probably, like all those things that take away from the strength of a statement, right? Yes. And then the big one for me was basically. Like I would just say basically all the time, and it would just be something that I knew when I said it, it would just make it seem like I wasn't really invested into what I was saying. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop saying basically. And so it became this thing where it wasn't right away that I did it, but every time I would say basically, it would be like that when you shock the dog, right? And you'd be like, oh, damn it. Like I said it. But like like you said, you're becoming aware of it. And so it takes reps and reps and reps and reps in order to get all of that switched over and work. But I mean, the first thing, like you said, is just listen to what you're saying in your head. Be aware of those words.
Yep. That's it, man. So, I think that once you can start doing that, you're on the road to at least betterment, we'll call it. So, and it's some of it is about slowing down, man. Right? Like we're moving, and so once you can slow down and start to correct these processes and these systems that you've put in place without knowing, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, for sure. It's the language one is such a powerful one, because it's like and we just actually talked about this, because I mean this was, like I said, the topic of the week, and we had our coaching call last night, and so we were talking about if you were to have somebody say to you, or even if you were to say to somebody else the words that are going on in your head, talking to yourself all day long, right, and you're saying those things to somebody else, like they'd slap you across the face a lot of times. You know what I mean? Like, why would you ever say anything like that to somebody else? But those are the words that are floating around in your own head, and it's got the same effect as somebody saying them to you. It's just yourself doing it. So you actually have more control over the situation. And so it's one of those things that it's you don't really realize how much impact it can have until you start to recognize the things that you say to yourself. It's
true, and I think also too we're kind of conditioned as men to think like your words they're not very powerful, right? In the sense of like my will should be better, all these things matter more. But then when you break it down, you start to really look at it. Like your words are powerful, man. Like, we've started wars over words. Words. You're right. There's been men that have got women to fall in love with them through words. This is a powerful and big deal. So controlling that and controlling the narrative, your own narrative, right? Because at the end of the day, like we're all telling ourselves some kind of various story in our head. And so being able to control that story through language is important. So even like when you're talking about goal setting, right? Like why do you want this goal? And if you can really get people to really say the thing, I want this goal because I want to make so-and-so proud. Or I want to make myself proud. Because some of those goals, people don't want to tell you the real reason. They'll say, oh, it'll be cool.
Dig. Yeah, you got to dig for them.
Yeah, it'll be cool. Well, cool's not really a thing, right? Like, I got it. Like, like my thing for a lot of my goals is I just want experiences, right? But some people want that, you have that back end goal or that thing that got you started, and maybe it's not the reason why you finish, but it's still there, and I think it's important to recognize that. So
yeah, was there anything specific when in your own head or practice with a lot of this stuff that was difficult for you to get over that hump with the inner language piece?
I mean, so when I went through everything I was going through, like we kind of touched on in the podcast. I was going through a really horrible divorce. I was transitioning out of the military, and one of the things through my divorce and through just dealing with a lot of the relationships that I had in my life at the time is I was dealing with a person who always said, I'm not okay. And so this hits on two pieces, right? It hits on the piece of who you surround yourself with, and then like how you talk to yourself. And so what happens when you typically surround yourself with somebody? Sometimes you start picking up their language. So that's what I did. I picked up the language. It's the first time I'd ever heard a person say, I'm not okay. And then that kind of slowly started creeping into my vernacular or just my head.
Yeah.
And it would be like, your self-talk or whatever is going on. It's like, you're not okay. And then the more you say something, the more you tend to believe it, whether it's bullshit or not, right? You start latching on to that story. And so I had that going on. And then as everything is happening, I'm trying to figure out how do I crawl out of this hole. And so I was reading The Power of Habit, I believe it was, at the same time, just so happened to be. And one of the things that the guy says in the book is that your environment, one of the quickest, easiest ways to change your habits is to reset your environment. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you're going to have good habits, it's just a reset. Right? And so I came back to Afghanistan. I came back out here, or not here, I was in Iraq this time.
Right.
I went back to Afghanistan and I kind of got rid of everything. Now, you can't always do that, right? The alternatives would have been numerous, from anything from, which I ended up doing as well, was moving out of my house. I changed everything, I'm pretty drastic, so I don't tell everybody to do like I do, because I'm the kind of person who I'll turn around tomorrow, I'll sell everything, and I'll be like, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But I will also say, same token that we talked about during the podcast, is you have to accept the lifelines that you've been given. And sometimes, depending on how severe your situation is, or how bad you want to change or instill a new habit, maybe severe or dire is the answer. So that's kind of where I started with changing my environments. That person was no longer in my life. And then I started by changing the words that I use surrounding everything. But it was started with like that, phrases like that. I'm not okay. I'm okay. How's your day? I stopped saying like it is what it is. I think is what it's a big one in the military.
Yeah.
I stopped saying it's a shit day or whatever, and I just started trying to attack my day.
I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's important to note too. It's like you said, it's a reps in. Like, it just takes time to get a lot of that stuff. I mean, because it's the same thing with training. I mean, if we're coming into something and you are, way overweight and out of shape, it took probably decades to get to that point, right? It's not going to be something that you fix in 2 weeks. And it's the same thing when we're talking about what's going on upstairs. It's stuff that you've been, like you said, conditioned in a lot of ways to think from probably childhood even, and I mean that stuff takes like some serious effort to change a lot of those patterns and those habits. And sometimes, like you said, the drastic change sometimes will help be the catalyst for a lot of things that come after, because I think a lot of times too, and it's all part of the same conditioning in your head, people are afraid of any change, but then doing something super drastic like, hey, I'm gonna just move cities, right? Like, but sometimes, I mean, that could be what it is.
I think depending on what it is and what you're talking about, don't take any options off the table.
Right.
I don't know, like, you guys went over your goal setting, but when I do it, particularly because it's not set in just one area of life. What I tell guys is write everything down. I don't care if you want to be a NASA astronaut.
Yeah.
I have you write it all down, and then we start crossing it off, and then we start focusing on what the priorities are. Yeah. So in the same way, I would say that is here. Like, if your habits and your patterns and your practices are so shitty or so bad that it's hindering you, it's hindering your life, when you recognize that, congratulations. Now, don't be so stubborn where you won't change it. And
absolutely.
Or you'll only change it in the fashion that you think has to happen. This is, like I said, same thing we talked about prior, like when we were on the podcast. Like, if you're talking about saving your life, and I offer you meditation, and you turn it down, Well, I mean, you don't know. That could be the thing. You might be right, and it might not be your thing, right?
But you won't know
You won't
unless
know.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm a fan. I'm always pushing on, explore these things, explore that, and everything else. So,
Let's dive into the habits thing, because it's kind of like the natural
mm-hmm.
segue from a lot of this stuff. And that was actually one of the questions that I ended up getting in from some people. A couple of them actually had variations of the same process or the same question, so I just kind of distilled it down to a different version of it. But the first one I want to ask is, you specifically, what is your habit building process look like when there's something that you've recognized as maybe weakness and you want to turn it into a strength? How do you go about switching it over and making that a positive habit for yourself?
So I'll go with a couple, right? And I try to use everything I can to a positive. And what I mean by that is, right, if I'm going to be on Instagram, why not use Instagram to help build my habit? Right? If I'm going to be on anything, I try to build in a backstop for that. Right? And then I'm talking about accountability as well. So partners, friends. The big one, though, the initial one, and I got it right here, right? For me, it's this.
Yep.
I'm going to go with the checklist. My checklist is going to be initial. I go through my morning. I have my habits that I have out in the morning. And then trying to build on the stuff that I learned, I try to do a lot of realistic things. Like, I know I have this habit already, so I'll stack it on top of that habit, which is straight out of James Clear and every habit thing you'll ever read. That's going to be the deal. It's like, so I really do try and pair my habits together, and I try to make sure if I have something that I'm already doing, that I can use it to reinforce that habit. So, I mean, we've kind of been following each other for a while, so you might have seen me post the bottles of water every day.
Yeah.
That's what that was.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with anything other than I'm going to be on Instagram anyways. I got to drink this liter of water every morning.
Yeah.
So I started building it in, and then once it became a habit, I could care less about putting it on Instagram.
Right. But it was just the posting it made it, and I do the same thing. The posting it made it, real to somebody else too. Mm-hmm. And it's like that form of accountability, right? Which is huge when you're trying to develop new habits, because, I mean, how easy is it if you're trying to do something on your own? If you start something, 2 days later you give up, nobody's ever going to know except you, right? Yeah. And a lot of times people don't have enough of that inner discipline built in yet to where that matters to them. And so, but they need that, mentor or coach or whatever it is. And so, for me, it was the same with when I post, my picture of me sitting around my campfire or whatever with my coffee, reading scripture, right? Like, I did that because I needed to hold myself to making sure I was reading every day, right? Because I wanted to do it. And then I would go through periods of time where I didn't post it. I was still doing it, but then I would also get messages from people who were following, like, "Hey, dude, is everything okay? Like, I noticed you didn't post a thing today." I was like, I read those every single morning. It really helps. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, like, it's bigger than just me reading it now.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of like a cool thing, but you don't realize it once it's a habit. You're like, I don't need to post, but somebody else is like, "Hey, dude, you okay? Like, I noticed you weren't doing this anymore." I'm like, no, I still am, I promise, but I'll help you out still now,
But that's good, and it helps build on that. It's the same thing for me. Like, when I started posting the water bottles, I started getting water bottles back. And guys were like, "Hey, man, I'm drinking my liter every morning too." And so, and then the same way, like, when I stopped posting it, and all of a sudden I was like, "Hey, are you still doing it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I still do this every morning." So, exactly. And I think the other thing too, if you're talking about habits and you're talking about your environment, the closer the person to you to help you be accountable with your habits, the better. We don't always have that, like we talked about, thank goodness for peace, love, and meat, things like this. And so you can have accountability partners who maybe aren't even in the same state as you. But
the same country.
Exactly.
Other end of the world.
Yeah, and so one of the other things is, if you can, right, whether it's your partner or whether it's your best friend or whatever, it's real easy when you're it's Wednesday date night, and you have habit X that you're trying to attain, and it's 6 p.m., and one person's on board and one person's not, whether it's a friend or whoever. it's real easy for them to start being like, hey, can we just do the thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then you abandon your habit. So the more you can get all that stuff kind of concise, or at the bare minimum, getting someone to understand, like, hey, this is a big deal and it will not change. I promise I will never go over my 10 minutes or whatever it is. And so I need your help keeping me accountable or not interrupting. And then I'll get back to being dad or whatever the thing is.
Totally. When you are in that process of, say, creating a new habit for yourself or trying to build on something positive, do you, because sometimes I tend to think it's down to the individual person, but do you have kind of like a set amount of time that you will like dedicate, like I'm given this 30 days and then after that you've noticed that it's pretty much set in stone? Does it depend on the habit and the person, or what do you kind of think about that?
I don't buy that it's set in stone. I think it's just you have to do it. I think the other thing is to try and build as much or as many consecutive streams as possible. You know what I mean? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a row. I think the biggest thing for me is minimums and maximums. Maybe not a maximum, but a minimum. Right? Like, so, I have a reading habit. My reading habit consists of 10 pages a day. Period. I have to do minimum 10 pages a day.
Yeah.
So there's my minimum, and so I know what has to get done and how I have to get it done. Whereas if I set this goal of I'm going to read 100 pages today, we all know what happens.
Right.
Kids, training, life, gas shortages, who knows? Right? Mm-hmm. It's just a thing that can happen. And so you can plan that out, or you can just go for, hey, here's my win today. One of the things, a long time ago, I went to a military school for survival, and one of the things they tell you in there is always look for the small victory. And so I constantly try to find that small victory, especially when you're talking about forming new habits. It can be as small as 1 page a day when you're talking about reading, right? Let's just break it down 1 page a day. Same thing we talked about the gym, right? Just show up 30 minutes every day.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do, show up 30 minutes. I want you to build a habit. I think the other thing too is focusing on maybe a step in the process. For me, I know as I get ready to go to the gym, I'm pretty corny, so I'm gonna let my secret out of the bag, right? I'm pretty corny, but I as I get ready to go to the gym every day, I have a playlist on YouTube. I listen to that same playlist. I get my pre-workout ready, or my coffee, or whatever it is I'm taking for that day. I start to go through that. I look at my training, and it's the same set and stone thing every day. So it's like a primer. As soon as I know that I hear that first playlist, okay, let's get ready.
Yeah.
And then it's literally just going through the steps, no matter how good, bad, or indifferent I feel that day.
Yeah, definitely. I think the concept of the streak is a really cool one too, because that kind of, and you can say that there's good and bad to it, but that kind of gamifies some of it too, which as men specifically, that is a very powerful motivator. Like to turn in something that has a score, you know what I'm saying? And so when it comes to the streak thing, like, okay, well I went 9 days in a row, but then I falter or whatever. Okay, well now do 10. Like it doesn't matter how many, just try to beat that streak the next time, and then before you know it, it's been 60-something days in your streak, and you haven't messed up. You know what I mean? And that gives it like a game aspect to it.
I mean, we see it with everything. Right? We see it with powerlifting too, right? Like at the end of the day, like maybe it's not a streak, but with powerlifting, right? Like I got into powerlifting and was like, 500 pounds, I'll stop.
Yeah.
Now, no, I'm not. So building in those goals, those habits, those things that are going to keep you kind of pressing forward is what I'm going to kind of always look for that, and that's what I kind of coach for my guys. It's like, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. You got to push in that direction.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because the first person that I mean, it's probably obviously been around for much longer, but when I was starting to get into the coaching space, one of the first people that I think introduced like the streak concept that I pay attention to, that I follow him, was Corey Gregory, who Corey G. Everybody knows him as it.
Yes.
He was Muscle Farm for a while, and now he's got his own thing. But because he did it with the Squat Every Day program that he put together, which is old, Bulgarian weightlifting thing, but he kind of brought it into mainstream fitness for a little bit. And now he does it with like his lunge streak. He lunges like 800 meters every single day, which I mean, like some of the stuff he does is insane, but he's proving the mental toughness side of it, right? Like he's all about the streak. And so now he's like, I've done, I think what he's up to now is like 47 something days in a row of lunging 800 meters. And he does it every single morning. I mean, like the dude's legs are just iron pipes. Like it's insane, but he's about the streak. And I remember like reading that the first time, like that just makes so much sense. Like just turn it in, and there's like so much stuff. And I think that's where CrossFit actually kind of deteriorated a lot of people. It became so gamified that people kind of like went too far with it, and that can happen too. There's people that will always take things to the extreme in that regard. But having something that you can use as a metric, as a motivator, is super powerful.
Yeah, I think anytime you can, I mean, I think you want to get to a place where it's intrinsic, but I mean, at the end of the day, like if you can get the streak going, that's all that matters.
Yeah,
I don't care how you get there, but I just need you to get there. And at the end of the day, too, as a coach, which is kind of funny, the question I posed the other day to coaches is like, how far are you willing to go, basically, for your clients and everything else. And so that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, all right, so I'm mentoring these guys, and he wants to go from point A to point B. So how am I going to pick him up and drop him off there? And then how am I going to get him to start doing that for himself? Right. And so a lot of times streaks are there. Maybe it's a certain goal. Maybe it's a certain subset of goals. Like, hey, man, a 500-pound deadlift is a far way away from that. But what's not far away is to get 2 deadlift sessions a weekend. That's the only thing I need you to do. Just 2 good sessions a week. Right? Or even like when I was getting ready for my last meet, like so the Pull 700, there would be days where the program would say, 5 sets of 3. And then at the end of the day, it was like, just get 18 reps. Somehow.
Right.
At the end of the day, I just need you to get 18 reps. Like, if it doesn't come in sets of 3, that's fine. Sets of 3 is what we want. That's optimal. But at the end of the day, again, we're back to minimums, right? Like, here's your minimum. Right. And so getting that minimum standard every time you do it. And I think there's also something else, too, to be said about just getting better at something.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so you're practicing every day. Because essentially that's what you're doing. You're building a habit, you're practicing every day. And so how do you get better at it? You can start, if you're, again, slowing everything down enough, or even journaling or something like that, you can start seeing the impediments and the things that get in your own way. And then there we go, again, like, are you an impediment person, or are you a person of ease? And so when I say that, so if you're going to read 10 pages a day, right? I do this with my kids. It's like I put the comic book on their bed, on their pillow. So before they go to bed every night, it's there. So it's easy. I don't have to worry about my son being like, I can't find it. It's there. Or if you're an impediment person, like my oldest daughter, right? I have to do something to stop her and slow her down for her to recognize I must do the thing. And so I think that's a part of it too. So when you're trying to build those habits and those streaks, trying to see those little things that are going to make you better as you're doing it. Or not just better, but it's just going to help play on building the streaks.
Yeah, I like that. Recognizing. Because it comes down to personality types,
Yeah.
And recognizing which one you are and making your roadmap from there. It's great. You got to do it.
I mean, you see it, like, Matt's a buddy of mine, and Matt will tell you, he'll be like, if it's too many steps, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So like he had his garage gym set up with his squat rack, and he had to find a way to put his dip attachment on, because he was like, if I don't put this thing on and leave it on, I'll never do this. And so the same thing. For me, I make sure that this book on the same table I sit at every morning, and I go over, okay, here's my checklist, here's the day's things, this has to get done, here's the morning minute, I call it morning minutes, here's all the things I'm going to do in the morning, and then that's how I start my day.
beautiful, dude. That's like that brings it all full circle back to the physical environment, right? Like setting up your area, whatever it is, to make it as easy for you to be productive and successful as possible. Like you are in control of so much of that, and getting that part into your mind that you are in control of so much of that is obviously sometimes the biggest like hump a lot of people got to get over, because they tend to think that I'm not in control of any of this. You know?
It's all happening to me. It's all happening to me. And instead of, I use the word fight sometimes. I don't like to use it, but I use it on purpose sometimes, because sometimes I think that's the only way people understand it. It's like, you have to fight this thing. Like, actively fight it, or else you will become subject to it.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things. Like, I wake up and I'm like, all right, I know me, right? I'm an impediment person, right? If something doesn't stop me, I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
I have to put blockers up, or I have to put very visible signs up, like, oh, here's the thing that you have to do. Because if not, I usually have 3 or 4 big tasks in the day, and that's all I care about.
Yeah.
Those other tasks, they will, like, every day I would like to write 250, 500 words. It's not part of my book writing. That's writing the book that's one thing. But then I'm going to do 200 words of just journaling and just getting my thoughts out.
Right.
But if it's not part of the big 3, if I don't put this book in the way, I'll forget it. Not even forget it. I'll just be like, it'll happen later, and we all know what happens later.
Right.
So it's a magical land, land where nothing happens.
Exactly. That's a great way to look at it. The way that I think about that too, and I bring it up just because it actually came up on our call last night with one of the guys, was he brought up the example of the parable of the 2 wolves.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of that same premise, just told in a different way. It's which one is the one you feed, right? Yeah. Like it depending on the situation, whatever you're talking about, you are the one that is essentially dictating the outcome.
For sure.
It's going to be whichever direction you're putting your energy is going to be what you get out of it.
I also think that brings us again back to like the story you tell yourself. Right? If the story you tell yourself is, I am a person in control, then you will start looking to be in control of all the things, right? I'm a person who's X, then this is what happens. So it's kind of like that. If you're looking at it one way, that's how you're going to see it. There's no other way.
Yeah, totally.
And the other portion of that, not to get too off topic though, but it's changing those habits for some people, and changing those stories is hard, because you essentially are telling yourself to keep lying to yourself for X amount of time.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the same thing, like I said, like the young lady I'm dealing with right now, right? Like she says no one cares about me, no one loves me. And I walk the dog through it. Like, so this person right here actually cared about you, but you sabotage this relationship because your story said X.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing here with your habits and your control, or your lack of control, or anything else. So I'm saying that this is what the deal is. The story is, I'm just a wild, carefree kind of guy, right? Why would you be the guy who sits down and is detailed and planned through and is planning your day out?
Yeah.
So now you have to break that habit of telling yourself that that's what you are, right? And to steal a line from something I just read the other day, man, it's the imposition of order, right? It's in order to get freedom, it's purchased at this cost. It's purchased at this cost, and this is the cost. The cost is, I am going to sit down every day and write this. The cost is that if I want to be good at X, I have to do this, so on and so forth. And I mean, you can get really anal about it. Man. You can be like, hey, I want to get good. Like you play the guitar. You can say, hey, it's going to take this amount of hours over this amount of time to do this. And you start backwards playing through that whole thing. Like, okay, this is what it looks like. This is painful. So I'm going to forego maybe hanging out tonight in order to get this extra 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Totally. To practice transitions, right? And that's a whole other piece, right? Like, how do you practice perfectly?
Yeah, absolutely. That actually brings up, when you bring up the guitar point, that brings up a really good example, because I remember when because I've been playing more or less since I was 11 years old, and so I mean, at this point, it's just been a lot of time, right? You build up accumulated time or whatever. But I used to get these instructional videos from guys like that I was watching college, and so I'd spend my free hours, that I wasn't lifting or at practice or doing schoolwork. I would just be riffing in my room.
Exactly.
And one of the things on one of them he had said, and it goes perfectly with this, because he said you have to just decide how good you want to be, because if you want to be this good, then you have to be aware of what it takes to get to that point. And he said, not everybody wants to be that good, and that's fine. You don't have to be, but you need to make sure where you want to go is set in, you are aware of that, so you can build the plan and go backwards. Because in his video, he was talking about when he learned, and this was Mark Tremonti, who is the guitar player for, used to be Creed, and he's Alter Bridge, and now he's got a ton of other things. He's like insane. He's one of the most underrated guitar players on the planet. But he would say when he was in college, he would go rent these like $1 instructional DVDs from college and literally would play for 9 hours a night. Like he would go get them when he was done with his homework at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. and literally play them all night because it was just $1 rental for a one-night rental. And so he was I only had one day with them. And so I would go through these instructional videos. I would literally play for 9 straight hours working on all the things from that video. And then I'd either go back and I'd rent it again, or I'd go rent another one and do that. But he's like, you do that for 10 years, 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
Like, you're obviously, but he's like, not everybody wants to be that good. And he's like, that's fine. You just got to understand where it is that you want to get to.
Or you think you want to be that good until it's laid out in front of you.
Right.
Like that's
exactly.
So that's another one I do for coaching, which is what I was trying to pull up here. I didn't want to seem like I was being rude, but we were talking about it.
No, not at all.
One of the things that we do, it's very informal. We don't do the formal version of it. There's a goal-setting plan. A lot of people like SMART goals, whatever. This one's called Whoopee.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day with the Whoopee, the only thing that matters is like whether you're willing to purchase the plan. And what I mean by purchase the plan is you're willing to pay the cost. So if you come to me and you say, hey, D, I want to run. So I did a thing where I trained guys to run a marathon and do a powerlifting meet at the same time, right? 24-week plan. And so most of these people had never run more than 5 miles, and most of them had never had real gym experience.
Right.
And so you're taking them from zero to hero. And so one of the things as we're going and we're doing this is like, what kind of race do you want to run? And somebody will tell me, I want to run a 4-hour or 3-hour marathon. Really? That's what you want to run? Okay, so here's what we're going to do is I'm going to dramatically change your diet. Right? You're going to be on a strict diet. You now have 4 to 5 days of conditioning with at least 2 long runs, and we're talking long. We're going to start off at like 4, but by the end of it, we're going to be in the 20s.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking long days, maybe two a days. We're talking about purchased recovery, like real recovery, not just sitting on my couch and everything else.
Right.
And then I say, hey, are you willing to do this? And they go, hell no, that's not what I want. So so I think what you want is a 5-hour marathon. So you're going to run 2 days a week with a third day of optional conditioning, right? And so that's one of the things I think when you're talking about goal setting, sometimes it happens. It took a long time for me to realize like not everybody wants to be a mutant.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not everybody wants to be a mutant or this crazy thing. But being in the special operations community, that's what I was used to.
That's
I thought everybody wanted to be, the next step, the next level. And finding out like everybody doesn't feel that way, including guys that I work with. They're just faking the funk or whatever. You realize like, oh, okay, well, I can't coach everybody the same way. I can't push everyone the same way. So asking you like, all right, so what is the level in which you die off? I no longer want any parts of this. I want to get fit, but I don't want a 6-pack. Right? Because if I have a 6-pack, then I have to be miserable and I got to be a Tupperware kid carrying around food to parties. Right? I don't want to do that.
Totally.
But what I do want to do is I want to be able to maintain and be the guy who can take his shirt off at the beach for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? There's two different costs.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I think that goes along with your habits and your goal setting and everything else.
I love that. I'm going to bring up one of the questions Let me find it here. Gotta scroll.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Because it kind of comes into the same thing that he's talking about. This one's from Bobby, one of the guys, and it has actually more to do with a lot of those, because it ties into this in the sense that we're talking about the decisions that you make, basically on how good you want to be at this. Those ones are going to be like the really tough decisions. Like, are you going to give up certain things in order to get to your goals, right? Are you willing to give up certain aspects of your life in order to do certain things? And sometimes those can be tough decisions, right? Or maybe it is like getting rid of some people in your life. Those are not easy. So it kind of has to do with the tough decision thing. It just says, what if any are the skills to build and make those decisions, to be in those tough situations, and then keeping the right mindset throughout? How do you go about building the skills in order to make those decisions? Because that is a skill in itself, being able to be comfortable making tough decisions like that.
We'll start off saying I'm going to give you two parts. It might multiply though.
Yeah.
I think one, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth, is that's just making decisions. Whether that's the small decisions to the hard decisions. One of the things that you see, especially with men who are kind of coming into their own, is they're really reeling with the power of making a decision. Whether it's taking your girlfriend out on a Thursday night, or it's just like, do I do 5-3-1, or do I do starting strength? It's like, pick one, man. Just pick one and go. And as you start to make those decisions, you start to become more and more confident in yourself. You also start to realize like where you fail and everything else. And I think in saying that, I think the problem, or what can get lost, is not dissecting your business as you go. You could just be making decisions just to be making decisions and never learn a thing. But if you stop every now and then, and again, goes back to some other good practices. For me, a good practice is journaling, and then reviewing my journal once a month. I review my journal once a month because why was I being a jerk all day on Thursday?
Yeah.
Right? And then I go through my journal, and hopefully I've captured it, and then I go, okay, I understand now. And then I can start to build upon that, or whatever it might be. I think that's number one when it comes to making those decisions. And then two, I'm going to kind of take it back to the cost. Certain costs aren't worth it, depending on what you want out of life. Your grander plan, right? Like if your grander plan is to be not to be an elite level powerlifter, but to be an awesome dad and husband, well, the 3-hour gym session might not be for you. Maybe the hour and a half is for you. And I think that is kind of where it comes down to, right? To steal from the book Essentialism, right? There is no such thing as priorities. There's no plural. There's a priority.
Yeah. Priority.
Yes.
Singular.
And so thinking of it in that fashion, man, what is your mission? Everything else should be building upon making you better for your mission. If your mission is, I am dad, then go train. Your kids need to see you train. They want you to train. But your kids probably don't need you to be Jay Cutler. Right? Right? They don't, right? They need you to be able to throw them around, run, jump, swim, roll around on the ground, maybe look good so they can have that, my dad's better than your dad, but that's it. That's it. They don't need all the other stuff. And it's just to make you better at being that. And so that's how I look at it. I was like, if this doesn't make me, so I'll take it back to when I was in the Army. I used to tell people this piece of advice a lot of guys in the military hated. And I was like, if it doesn't make me a better medicator, shooter, communicator, or anything on the battlefield, then I don't care. I don't care about your fancy badges, your bells and whistles, or anything else. Don't get me wrong, everybody likes them, they're all cool, whatever. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't do any of those things, then it's a moot point. And so that's where I would say, like, start making your decisions based on, I want to be the best college student. I want to be the best, yada, yada, yada. And it can be 2 and 3 fold. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't go 2 or 3 fold. I would break it out a hierarchy of
Right.
sorts.
Sure.
But
It's the highest leverage item first, basically. Like what's going to give you the most return, make the decision based on that. But then also too, it's like how it's becoming comfortable with those decisions, and that just comes from, like you said, practice of making those decisions. Like you
and
just
also
gotta be secure and comfortable in the things that you say you're going to do and decide.
and also just understanding that like it's when things cost, it's never nice. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Right? But I mean, it's at what cost do you want? Again, it's just like do you know, when I was getting ready for selection, right? My poor ex-wife, I was a lunatic, right? Like my idea of quality time was me on the spin bike trying to keep my heart rate at 160 beats a minute while she sat on the couch, right? Now looking back on it, there's probably a better way for me to do that.
Right.
But at the time, that's the cost. That's how I saw the cost. Right? Getting ready for this powerlifting meet, right, was very important to me, but being a dad was more important.
Right.
So it really sucks to try and have a sub-max deadlift at 05 in the morning on no fuel. So I had to figure that out because it was important to me, but not more important. So I think those are the things, and understanding like you're gonna pay, you're supposed to pay. It's just whether you want to.
That brings up a good point too, because it really is because we're talking about being secure with what your decision making process is, but it's going into it with a plan of how you're going to make those decisions. Like you said, it's going to be, this is why, like this is the framework all my decisions are coming through. Like, so if it's not a part of this, but a lot of people don't have that framework, and so that's why they're not comfortable with what the outcomes could be, and that's where all that worry about the outcomes of decisions. Well, it's like, well, did you funnel it through what your priorities are? And that's the way to be comfortable with what you decide to do, and then just being firm and standing by that. I mean, if you're floating all over the place and being wishy-washy, you're not really standing for anything that you say you want to work towards, then you'll be a mess of crappy decisions.
Yeah, and so I'll say a couple of things to that, right? The first thing I'll say is make sure it's something that you actually really want. Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we say and we think we want. We talked about the cost and everything else, but a lot of times, like I'll get guys that come to me and go, "Okay, man, I want to lose weight." And then you give them the bare minimum cost, and they're still not going to make it. And so it's for me, it's asking, it's like, hey man, do you really want to do this, or is this just something that everyone is saying to you? You really want to get better at that. I think you should lose it, but I can't be the one that thinks that. You really want to get better at that. And so if it's not something you really want, this is all hopeless and pointless.
Yeah, that's a good to in like the coaching dynamic, right? Like the coach can't want it more than you do.
No.
Because I can't do the stuff for you. Like you ultimately have to be the one that says, "Okay, I'm ready to do this."
It's a very rare case. It's a very rare case when you as a coach can get that opportunity. I've been there once or twice, but it's also too much. I'll be honest with you. Right? I had a guy who I understood that he looked at me in a very father-like figure in his life, and so he was willing to do things that he didn't really want to do. Mm-hmm. And so we used that to push him over the hump and get him, down 60 pounds. But guess what? As soon as I wasn't a part of that equation anymore, those 60 pounds were back. And so, again, you have to ask yourself, is this something that I really want, or am I doing this for someone else, or whatever the case is. The last two things I'll say about this is value-based and priorities are a good way to direct the quality of your decisions. And so it's something I actually forgot, and I'm glad you brought it up. One of the things that I have tried to do is make less decisions now. And what I mean by that is, because of my values, because of my priorities, the decision it's not a decision.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So like when I come home, because I'm gone so often, if it's between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., it's a hard no.
Right.
Right? That's Zoe and Miles' time. Right?
Yep.
And Chase, right? Those are my three youngest. Right?
Yep.
Chase is 16, so he might or may not care, right? But Zoe and Miles' time. So there's no decision there. Every now and then there's a negotiation because life is life, but for the most part, I don't have to do that. I don't have to make that decision or that call. And so that's why I say, like, when you start finding avenues of your life where you can just, there is no decision because the decision is made based on your values or priority, excuse me. And so that's what I would say too. And again, just keeping all that in mind in conjunction. And actually, I'll sum it up, my last piece with this, I'll sum it up with this. The thing that we talked about in my group very recently is the quality of your decisions determines your life in conjunction with your ability to endure discomfort.
Like that last part.
Right? So you have to make quality decisions. And let's be real and very honest right now, making good decisions is more important than ever. Because you have social media, you have cell phones, video recordings. You're somebody's watching.
Yeah.
And so your ability to be amplified and influenced or torn down is threefold. And so with that being said, you have to make sure quality good decisions are what you're moving towards. And when you're making these quality good decisions, and that happens, and if we all agree that decisions come at a cost, now you have to be able to endure that discomfort.
Yeah.
It's like both. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say that the enduring part is.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a business owner.
Yeah. It's entrepreneur life, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's any. I mean, but it can be applicable to so many different avenues. But like, I'm looking at it from the lens of, like you just said, business owner, right? Like, there's probably, I would say, no less than 3 times a week I consider burning everything down and like just going and getting a job somewhere. Like,
yeah,
I would say that's probably the minimum amount of times during a week that happens. But you get into this understanding that that's just going to be how it is, and you just got to learn how to ride through those waves and understand that this is just a temporary moment where crap doesn't seem like it's working and I'm just getting ticked off. I just got to go do something else and come back to this and build it back with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
And
that's it, man. Dude. Yeah, and I mean that is literally the definition. Right? This is going to be uncomfortable, and then. Am I okay with this? And I think if we're honest and we really look at it and pull back and look at it, right? 78-year lifespan. At the end of my 78 years, on my deathbed, I don't think I'm going to be talking about the discomfort I had in building this thing. Whether it's a business, a relationship, whatever. I hope to be talking about something else.
Well, and even though if you are talking about like the parts that sucked, looking back on those moments is oftentimes like the best moments to look back on. Like I can't remember if it was if we talked about it on the podcast or another time you and I were talking, but I think it was Stephen.
The 2 types of fun.
Gave the example and I'll bring it up just because I love the story. But he said you never are looking back 20 years ago and remembering how fun a roller coaster that you rode was. Be like, oh man, the roller coaster was a great time or whatever. But he's like, but you look back 20 years later on a hunting trip that you killed yourself for 3 days and it sucked and it rained and you didn't even get anything. You barely saw any animals, but you look back and like, man, that was a blast, dude. I love that weekend. But like that perspective, looking backwards, it changes everything.
Yeah, and it's funny bringing that up because it's something I actually use that story a lot, and it's also something that I can definitely maintain is true for 20 years. Running around with the youth, some of my favorite moments are just miserable. They are misery packed with laughs at the same time. It's like, so I completely agree and understand. When I'm saying that, what I mean is the truly uncomfortable ones where you're at that moment where you're like, I will burn this entire thing down right now.
Yep. Totally.
And I don't. I mean, it's the same thing for your own interpersonal problems and stuff like that. If you look at relationships, right? Like, how often have you looked back on an argument and been like, what was that about?
Yeah.
Why would and so I tell people that, same thing for these problems or these workouts or whatever. Oh, this is gonna suck or whatever. No, bro, it's 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's gonna burn, and then 3 hours from now, you're not even gonna remember.
Yeah, exactly. Or you'll tell somebody else, man, I had a great workout today.
or you'll use it as a badge of honor.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is fine too, right? And so, just something to think about, man.
Totally. Well, we've been rolling for an hour, but I did have one more question that got sent in that I wanted because I thought it was kind of a good one to wrap up on. How do you decide or determine for yourself when you've been successful at something? Like, is it like there's this, I did it, or do you kind of like just prescribe to the, it's a work in progress forever kind of thing? Do you kind of have a mindset approach on that?
So for habits, I think it's always just a work in progress / I try to have a measure, right? Like, so using the 10 pages a day with reading, right?
Right.
My advanced metric, if you will, is if I can do 10 pages 2 to 3 times a day. Right? So that's what I'm trying to get to now. I'm trying to get my 10 pages in the morning, and then I have my book with me so I can try and steal 10 pages at lunch.
Nice.
And then I get home, and I'm trying to steal another 10 pages before I go to bed. Right? Which is the hardest 10 pages I've had so far.
Right.
But so that's the way I look at it. I try to have some kind of metric on almost because that's how my brain works. I'm a guy who likes metrics. I will say that there are some where I've tried to pick them up as habits, or I did pick them up as habits, and I realized it just wasn't as fruitful as I thought. And I think that's important in order to. I've tried various versions of meditation, and I discarded most of them because most of them weren't for me. And then now I've landed on an app that I like, and everything else, and now that's what I stick with. So, I think that's kind of the route.
Yeah.
So, as far as goals, I mean, I go into every goal with very, very concrete terms.
Yeah. So I did this. Time to move on.
Yeah, like with powerlifting, I'm chasing 1800. I'm at 1742 or 1670 official, right? Or 1680 official, 1742 unofficial. And so I know where I'm at and I know where I'm going. It's just, once I get there, then I'll reassess. Who knows?
Totally. I love it, man. Well, hey, thank you for making the time today. And,
for sure, man. Thank you for.
This is going to be It's recorded and posted. Going to be in our group because there were a few guys that weren't able to make it on today. I think we had up to 6 at one time, kind of fluttering up. I was looking at the little things, so guys were coming in and out, which is awesome. But they'll be able to watch this forever. So
awesome.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you, and this was super valuable. So thanks, man.
Hey, no problem, man, brother. I appreciate it. Anytime you need anything, let me know.
Awesome.
Later.
And